Today we're going to look at a tool within the Baumer Verisens software. It's called the circle tool, and it takes a look at circles and the characteristics of that circle. So for example, diameter, position of that circle, and then also the roundness. I'll show you how to set that up. So if you go to the Check Features tab, you can see here I've already set up a part location on contours tool, and that's just going to track this circle as it moves within the image. And these circles I've just drawn through the paint application on my computer, so they're not perfectly round, which is good because it'll show how the roundness changes as the circles change as well. So I think I drew an oval here as well, so you're going to see how that roundness percentage is going to change. Okay, so you go to the Check Features tab, you go to Add, you go to the Geometry tab, and then the second one down is called Circle Tool. You can draw this circle here, and the way it works is the inner circle, the small one, has to be inside the circle, and the outer one, the big one, has to be outside the circle. You say OK, and then as that part moves around, that circle tool is going to move around with it. So that's how that works. There's a bunch of different settings here, so I'll go through them in detail. So the three different things you can test for: there's position, which is how far away from the original train circle the circle you're looking at is. The diameter, I'm going to undo the position because they're all going to be in different areas within the image. Diameter is how big your inner or outer diameter is. Right now it's looking at the inner diameter, and you can tell that because this green circle is the inner diameter. You can change that in several different ways. Right now you're looking at a transition of either light to dark or dark to light. If I change this from bright to dark, which is what it's looking at right now, to dark to bright, it's going to go to the outer diameter. So in that case it's 208 pixels as opposed to 194, which was the original inner diameter. Another way of doing that is right now it's looking from inside to outside, so it's going from this inner little circle to the outer circle, and you can see that's the way the arrow is pointing. If I switch that from outer to inner, you can see the arrows are pointing inwards. So it's trying to pick up the first edge it sees. So if I do both directions, it'll pick up the first edge it sees, which is, bright to dark, and then it'll pick up the outer diameter as opposed to inside to outside. Then it'll move this way along this blue line and pick up the first edge it sees, which is the inner diameter. So those are the different settings. There's a couple more settings for the actual circle. So we went over the transition. The minimum edge length, this is dependent on how big of a circle you have. If you have a very small circle, you want that to be short. If you have a very large circle, you want that to be long. And that just determines how big of an edge it's looking for as it goes around. The other thing is the contrast, minimum contrast. In this case is white and black, so it's going to be, you can have that set at high contrast, but a lot of times it's going to be gray on white or something like that, so you're going to have that set at lower contrast. That just depends on what application you're running, as well as how much noise you want to eliminate and things like that. Okay, so let's run through a couple of these different images. So here we have a much bigger circle. Let me adjust these thresholds. These red bars, of course, are thresholds, upper and lower limits. If we go back to the original circle here, it has a 95% roundness. And again, like I said, I just drew these circles within some software on my computer. This circle has a 99% roundness, so I drew a pretty good circle there. The diameter is much bigger, 256 pixels, and we're going from the inside to the outside, so that's going to be the measurement of the inner diameter. Whereas I think the last one was 194. Now it's 256. Makes sense because it's much bigger. You can see that position moved around as well because it's not in the same location as the original one. This one is a much smaller circle, so the inner diameter is only 130 pixels. The roundness is 92%. You can adjust these thresholds as well. So this circle is not as round, it's more oval shaped. This one's 94%. You can see the diameter changed a bit too. So this is where it gets interesting because I just drew an oval here in the software. You can see how the roundness is really low here. It's 74%. Which makes sense because this is an oval, not even really circular. So if you're trying to make sure like holes within an object are, you know, a certain circularity, that's a good tool for measuring that. And then finally, where is it? This one. I drew a kind of semicircle, 3/4 of a circle, and the reason I wanted to show you this is because there's this form here which you could check, sector of an annulus, and this is good for measuring shapes like this because it's not a full circle. It'll draw the rest of the circle in there and then measure the roundness and things like that. But let's say you're measuring things that aren't full circles. You want to use something like this, and it's called sector of an annulus as opposed to annulus, which is the full 360. And like I was showing you here, you can adjust how much of that you want to measure. That's really all there is to it. That's all the settings, and these are the 3 different things you can measure with this tool.